The House of Representatives approved a bill Saturday that would inject $25 billion into the U.S. Postal Service. If it becomes law, the bill would also prevent any future changes that may slow down mail ahead of Election Day. CBS News correspondent Michael George reports.
The bill is passed.
The House passed Postal Service legislation that Democrats say is needed to protect the November election.
It was so angering for Americans across the political spectrum that President Trump and Postmaster General DeJoy openly sabotaged the Postal Service in order to prevent people from casting votes through the mail.
The Democrat-sponsored bill calls for the cash-strapped Postal Service to receive an extra $25 billion in funding. House Republicans slammed the legislation, which would also reverse recent Postal Service changes amid concerns about mail-in voting.
This bill is a sham. It is a shame.
Is this part of some vast conspiracy? No. It's part of a decades-long realignment process where the post office is trying to match the needs of the consumers to the post office infrastructure.
After a barrage of criticism, Postmaster General DeJoy said he would halt cost-cutting moves until after the presidential election.
The Postal Service is fully capable and committed to delivering the nation's election mail securely and on time.
On Friday, he told a Senate committee recent delays will not affect mail-in voting. But DeJoy said he would not restore mailboxes and sorting machines that have been removed. President Trump, a vocal critic of mail-in balloting, is now saying he'll deploy law enforcement to polling places.
It's a suppress the vote tactic, as is the suppressing of the ability of the postal system to deliver on its responsibility.
It's unclear if the president has the authority to bring officers to the polls on Election Day. Michael George, CBS News.
So for more on that, CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper joins me now. Hey, Molly, good to see you. So start us off with a reality check. What happens to this bill in the Senate?
This bill goes nowhere in the Senate. As it is right now, it goes nowhere. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has pretty much said he's not bringing this up as a standalone measure, but does not rule out the option of having a more comprehensive measure that would deal with wider issues of the unemployment money running out, the money to small businesses, you know, a broader package related to COVID, and including some sort of relief for the post office in that. But as it stands, those conversations have not been going on between the administration and Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. And so it's unclear if that would even happen. But in terms of a standalone measure, the bill that was passed in the House yesterday, Mitch McConnell's not bringing it up.
And Molly, it passed with some Republicans actually crossing the aisle in support. I wonder if Senate Republicans or the White House are at all worried that these attacks on the Postal Service or deciding not to take up this legislation could in fact backfire on them.
Well, that is a good question, because there are a number of Republicans in states, especially the senators who represent the state, like Alaska, who rely on the mail service, the USPS, to get their packages and food, for that matter, out to rural, remote areas. That's the thing that the USPS does. The Postal Service goes the quote-unquote last mile to make sure packages and food orders, et cetera, so forth, actually get to every individual's residence or workplace. And that's why you'll have senators like Lisa Murkowski, who is a Republican from Alaska, Dan Sullivan, who's running for re-election in Alaska, who are hesitant, and they're not so happy when they hear the president sort of politicizing the USPS and equating mail-in ballots with Postal Service, because really it's so much bigger than that in places like Ohio as well. Alaska, where there are so many residents that depend on the mail service for their prescription drugs, for example. In fact, I have a feeling that if Democrats really focused on prescription drugs not getting to their constituents, that may have played a little bit better with Republicans. But there are a number of Republicans, as we saw in the vote yesterday, who think that the Democrats are really trying to politicize this issue. But again, at least 26 Republicans voted with Democrats, and that shows that there are Republicans who want to make sure that there's no funny games or funny business going on with the USPS. And even under his own admission, Louis DeJoy, who we heard from on Friday, said that there had been some delays due to issues related to, obviously, the changes he had implemented, the cost-cutting measures, eliminating overtime, but also other structural issues that he's trying to change in terms of getting the trucks out on time. So again, it could backfire, but it really depends on how the Democrats play this.
Well, you bring up the Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy. He has been under fire. He told the Senate Friday that his, quote, #1 priority is to ensure election mail will be handled in a timely, secure manner. But he didn't outline a specific plan, and he is going to be back on Capitol Hill to testify before the House on Monday. What do we expect to hear from him, and what are some of those tough questions that you expect will be posed to the Postmaster General?
Well, I'm not quite sure what to expect to hear from him, given that a lot of the House Democrats on the oversight panel have really been gearing up for this hearing because they've looked at how Louis DeJoy came into his position. Keep in mind, he's been on the job for 60 days. And they look at his background. He doesn't have a background with the Postal Service. Well, that shouldn't rule a person out from being Postmaster General, because really the position is about running a big corporation, essentially, and making sure the trains and trucks run on time and people get their packages. But the thing is Democrats have been looking at the money that he has contributed to the president, and Republicans, as Mitt Romney brought up on Friday, that he's given both to Trump and to Romney's presidential campaigns. But really, Democrats are focused in on why is this individual qualified to run the post office, especially at a time when, we're in the midst of a pandemic and so many Americans are reliant on the Postal Service for, again, as I said, prescription drug coverage, their prescription drugs, but also so many more people are ordering things online and getting packages, and the USPS has to process that. And in the middle of this, Louis DeJoy came in and, again, cut overtime and limited the amounts of stops individual USPS trucks could make in a day, not allowing individuals to go to take extra trips that would have been off their normal hours. And DeJoy has said that he's put a pause on it and intends to, again, and he says that the election mail will be fine and that he'll treat it as first-class mail. But House Democrats, especially on the Oversight Committee, have done a lot of research and have looked into the performance of the Postal Service over the past 60 days since DeJoy took the lead, and they are going to come out hard charging. And I have a feeling, and I am anticipating, that this hearing will have more fireworks, so to speak, than the hearing on Friday.
All right, one last question for you, Molly. President Trump is now floating the idea of deploying law enforcement to polling places. Why is he suggesting this, and are we hearing any reaction from lawmakers or local leaders?
Well, the president he wants to make sure that that individuals all have the right to vote and that there's no funny business going on. But in terms of deploying individual law enforcement agents to the polling places, that's unclear, as Michael George just said, because there's been a Supreme Court case on it back in the 80s that says that you can't necessarily deploy law enforcement to these polling places proactively, as opposed to protecting people who are going to the polls. This is an unclear question, and and the members that I've talked to think that was more bluster than actual edict, as a lot of what they hear from the president tends to be. But it is raising concern, especially among Democrats who feel like, again, they don't want any shenanigans going on, and they're already thinking that the president is trying to mess with the USPS, as they've been saying. Don't mess with the USPS.
All right, Molly Hooper, thank you.